And welcome to another Music Talk Tuesday, and today I'm going to be addressing, in particular for this video, holograms slash robots as musicians. Now this has, I think, become an interesting topic as we've seen technology evolve over the years. There is actually a robot band out there composed of all robots, no humans. And there's also been a huge craze, in particular within Japan, for holograms as being the performers and not an actual person. So it's a very interesting phenomena and discovery by technology, but I also feel like it sort of takes away certain things that are very sort of human. And also with the rise of auto-tune, I feel that our music is sort of heading almost a very electronic, technology-oriented sound, and not so much really reflection of kind of like the human spirit. And I think that is largely to do, with this rise of computers and of being able to digitalize things. I think it's only a huge possibility that we will see these kinds of sort of trends happening when it comes to music, especially since it's already fairly popular within Japan. Now, I could tell that even younger generations were kind of turned off by this idea of having a hologram or some kind of machine being the performer, and preferred the more human element. And I think this is a part of what I was saying earlier in how far we've come in as far as technology is concerned with advancing technology. At the same time, it discourages human capability and puts that on the side and says, oh, that's no longer important. The technology will create sort of the entertainment for us. Now, I find this to be very odd because I don't think robots are designed like humans, and that they would be able to really compose something that would be, I guess you could say, as I think human-like or emotional. Like it doesn't have, I think, at least from what I could tell from the music that I've listened to that involves this kind of technology. It sounds very robotic. It sounds like that this was, it was calculated. It was rendered through some kind of technology in order to produce it. Whereas when it's an actual human person behind the instruments and the final composition, you get something that I think is totally, completely different and doesn't seem to fit in with this new technology. And I think this leads to a lot of social implications too, like, isn't it bizarre if you have, a hologram as a sort of someone that you, I guess, look up to, or someone that you aspire to be? I mean, there is, I think, a limitation as far as personality is concerned and identity. Yes, they can create a physical image, because that's what they do with holograms, in particular holographic sort of musicians within Japan. They make them look like very anime style cartoon characters, but they don't look anything human at all, and they're purely designed to be fictional. And so I'm wondering if this really translates well when you want to present something that's human, and you want to showcase something that is relatable. Like, how can you relate to a hologram? It doesn't have a personality. It's just sort of made up through technology. And again, I do admire the people that are trying to sort of bring these sorts of ideas to the forefront. But at the same time, I think it's dabbling into things that are just kind of unnecessary. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of musicians are way overpaid for what they really end up producing. I think that is a an issue, but I think what we really need to realize is do we want a robot sort of as a representation of ourselves within the media? Because a lot of the times through art, we try to show something human. We try to show something that's relatable, something that you can um, showcase and at the same time, convey something that's very personal. With a hologram, you can't really gain the same kind of I think emotional depth that comes with a human performing or a human composing some kind of music. Yes, I think they can produce good work, I mean, through this kind of technology, but at the same time, I feel like it's very robotic, especially when you look at the kinds of songs that they end up composing. You see how in particular with the Japanese holograms, how they're kind of, it feels very auto-tuned. It feels very, even the hologram too, she kind of looks like a hologram. I mean, she doesn't look like an actual live performer. You obviously know that you're not going to be able to have a conversation with this person backstage. You wouldn't really have a VIP, you would, unless they somehow program the hologram to communicate and, be like a human. So yeah, I think there's just a lot of bizarre things that are coming about because of this kind of technology and because we've become so um, enamored with this idea that we have to insert it in everything that exists within human existence. So I think this brings up a lot of issues. I can understand through a cost perspective that this reduces the cost probably by a significant margin. Like, if all you needed to do was just have a hologram do everything and have it be programmed somehow to ultimately perform, it's a lot cheaper than maybe getting an actual person to write everything, compose everything, and perform it. But I think, that just takes away the talent and the ability that this one person has, and, saying that that's worthless now and that, oh, we're just going to use this, this hologram to do everything for us, instead of relying on the human spirit and the passion, because some people have a real deep passion for this kind of, for showcasing their music. So I don't understand why there needs to be like these kinds of replacements in order for us to, to save maybe a little bit on cost. I just don't understand that. And even then, I mean, obviously there can be, I think, some issues too with, there's obviously musicians that are going to be spoiled and cause a ruckus and, do things that that is sometimes difficult, I think, to deal with. But on the one hand, I feel like that there are a lot of musicians out there who do try to maintain a sense of professionalism and don't try to cross the line constantly. Um, so I think, I can understand why there would be some incentive for people to want to have this kind of a replacement. But I honestly feel like it takes away from the human element. Um, and the thing is, too, is I think when you look at the very popular people that exist within music nowadays, since a lot of them are reliant on autotune, you don't really get the same craft and talent that a lot of artists had before autotune within the 90s and backwards. And so I think really autotune is what drove, um, and this technology drove away real actual talent. Because now it is all very superficial, and it's about how you look, and it's and how you present yourself, and all that, and it's all about getting attention and who can cause the most havoc, and who can generate the most buzz everywhere and maintain a sense of relevancy. That's what it's all about, and it's not become about the creativity, the time and effort, the energy anymore. It's not about that. And I think that was largely stimulated by the autotune and by the ability for musicians um, to and in particular the the companies not to want to invest in actual talent anymore, and instead focus on a very commercialized kind of approach. And I think this kind of only enhances it, just because you're taking out the human element completely and replacing it with a machine. Um, but I find this topic in particular to be really interesting because I think there is some talent that you could say could come out of somebody making a machine to do some music. But at the same time, I think it takes away from the um, human ability. Because I think we all have different talents, we all have different skills and things that we can apply ourselves to, and I think taking that away little by little and sort of replacing it, makes it so, there's it just shows you how much more absorbed we become in the technology space, and how it's not about engaging in the real world. It's about escaping to that virtual reality, escaping to that, that animated character that really isn't there. It is very, it's just not encouraging to me, at least, to see this kind of approach being executed. I mean, I think there is definitely a lot of other things that technology can be doing right now than trying to insert itself within the music industry. Why not it go to, medicine and finding cures for cancer and all that stuff? That's perfectly fine. That's where it can be really utilized. But here, for just to superficially replace entertainment, um, with something that's not real, I just think is kind of, on the one hand, I just think it's really ridiculous, and on the other side too, I think there is this limitation that it puts on to people's potential, because I think there are just some things that computers won't be able to do in the same way a human can do. But I think the scary thing is we keep trying to find ways to do it. We keep trying to find some kind of way to make uh, things more and more advanced to the point where we're pretty much creating robots that are humans. And we're creating, musicians that are humans. We're replacing human with machine. And I think that is very discouraging, and I think there's definitely other ways into which this kind of technology can be, utilized. I mean, there's just other things. I think, there's just other parts of the sphere of the economy where technology can be really utilized and really help people. And then there's, on the one hand, where I feel like a lot of the other times it's just completely unnecessary, but it's done for the superficial reason of just minimizing costs instead of really trying to, invest in human growth and human endeavor. And that's what really, I think, makes me, on the one hand, it makes me angry because it's like, okay, you're just doing this just so you can maybe save a couple of bucks. And then on the one hand, you're creating something that's not even human, that's not even relatable anymore. You're just putting something in its place, and I just find that very just discouraging. And even the kids, I thought the kids, in particular, there was a video that I watched where the kids were basically reviewing this, and they were confused. They didn't really know what it was. When they figured it out, they were kind of discouraged by it. They didn't like the idea of having a hologram as a star. And I can really see why. And I think I just found it surprising that they would have that same mentality as I do, being from this very tech savvy, um, very technologically, you know, based culture, that young kids in particular really grow up with. I mean, I thought they would be all over this, but they seemed very, um, they didn't seem to really care for it too much. And they didn't even think the music was all that impressive either. And to be honest, too, I think a lot of the music that is really hologrammed and computerized isn't really all that impressive to me. Like it's no Mozart. It's no Mozart. It's no Beethoven. It's no it just doesn't have the same craft. And it's trying to be, though. It's trying to be that. But I just think that there's it's just not human. It's just not the same. So that's just really my 2 cents on this whole thing. I think it's a little overboard. I mean, I think I can see this being utilized for maybe artists to improve um, their maybe their image. Uh, Maybe it'll encourage artists to be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't act this way, otherwise I'm going to be replaced by a hologram. I think that kind of encouraging the more positive behavior element and being less spoiled and narcissistic, maybe not being paid as paid millions and bajillions of dollars to do what they do, and actually maybe allow more competition. I think if the music industry wasn't so biased to certain artists, we would have a lot more competition within that field, and there would be a lot more people that others would be aware of. But basically, all you hear about is really the top 10 of musicians nowadays. There's not a huge amount of variety, not a huge amount of competition. It's very. I think the music industry has become fairly on a. It seems to be a little bit more on the side of a monopoly, and not based on, and not really based within competition through genres, because there is really a genre that has remained the most prominent, and that is, I think, really pop. If you look at what kids really listen to nowadays. So I think, um, if there was this less biased approach to things, I think we would be a whole lot better. And I think we wouldn't really necessarily need the technology, because, I mean, either way, even if we were to pay somebody to do it, it still wouldn't make a huge amount of difference, because there would still be a significant amount of money to go around, and you wouldn't be paying this one person so much money. Um, so I think that's really what it all boils down to. But that's just my personal opinion when it comes to this kind of technology. I think I can understand why it is going sort of in this direction, but I think that, I would rather personally listen to a human being perform and have him mess up on a line than listen to a computer who does every note perfectly. Um, I just think that there's just something about somebody putting themselves out there in such a way, that I think it works, and it doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to be knowledgeized, or however you would say that. But I'm open to hearing what anybody else has to say about this. But again, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.